So good evening, everybody. It is so wonderful to be back here at Mussar Monday. And tonight, we are going to start a completely new subject. It's still in the realm of Mussar, because this is Mussar Mondays. But we just concluded the Shema, and I thought it might be a very, very good idea to at least learn the first chapter of the Ramchal's book of Mesilat Yesharim, which is the path of the just, or the ways of the upright, way of the upright. And I think it's really an amazing book. And I'll just tell you a few things from the introduction of the Ramchal, and then we'll go straight into the first chapter. The Ramchal begins by telling us that I did not write this book to teach you anything you don't know. Because you know it all. You're all wise people, you're smart people, you're capable people, you're talented people, and you know a lot. And you're not going to learn anything new. So why am I writing this book? Because of all of the knowledge we have in these areas, we lose sight of it. And we don't recognize. You ever look for your keys and the keys are right there in front of you, but you just don't see them? Why? Because you're so used to seeing them so you don't recognize them. You ever paint your house and you're like, wow, I love that color. And how long does it take for you not even to realize that the color has changed? Right? It's about a week or two and you're done. You see new drapes and it becomes normal and you don't even realize how special it is. You buy a brand new car and you're like, that leather smell, that new car smell, right? How long does that last? Right? Not long. You think that, I'm going to have this freshness, this newness forever. Right? It's always going to be like new. I'm always going to take care of it like it's new. And it just lasts a week, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You start throwing your coffee cups down. No, of course not. No. Right? But it's just a matter of time till you get it. So what he's saying is that because what the Ramchal is teaching us here, is telling us first is in the introduction, is that because these things, it's so common for us, we don't even pay attention. I'll give you another example. Is there anybody here who doesn't think that anger is terrible? Or show your hands if you think anger is okay. Anger is perfectly fine. No, nobody. We all agree. Yet do any of us get angry? Sure. One of the great muscles that we have that if we don't exercise it, we lose it, is an example I've given numerous times. We're all capable of being givers. But if we don't exercise the giving muscle, then we stop being givers. You have to exercise that muscle. We all know that giving is a very important thing, but yet sometimes we fall short of our responsibilities because we just haven't exercised it. We haven't thought about it. So this is what the Ramchal is dedicating this book to, is not things we don't know. It's things we know, but it's things that because we know them so well and they've been repeated multiple times throughout our lives, in great lengths sometimes. So we know it. And we don't, anybody know that anybody, can I ask just a random question, okay? Anybody know what the speed limit is here, right on this road? I have no idea. We assume that the city speed limit is 35, right? It's the city speed limit. But do we notice every time we pass a speed limit sign that, Cal, remember now 30? No, because we saw it about 50,000 times already. So because we know it so well, we sometimes don't even know it.
And we're driving 55.
And we're driving, exactly. And also we're driving too fast to even notice. Right. That's right. So the first thing Ramchal is telling us in his introduction is, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Everything I'm going to tell you, you know already. However, because it's so common, because you know it so well, you don't pay attention to it. Okay, it's a very important point. Now, the next thing he says is that you have different types of people. You have the really, really smart intellectualites, right? These really smart people, and then you have scientists, and you have all these different. And people think that only the dense-minded, only the small people, only the small people really work on their traits. You know who works on their anger? The guy who's limited on his intellectual capacity. That's the guy who works on his traits, because us intellectual people, we're busy dealing with, with the stars and the moon and all of the other galaxies, and we can tell you how to send a rocket to the moon. But but for us to work on our traits, and it's funny because if you look at all of these philosophers, the great philosophers, that the worst traits you can possibly imagine, the worst traits. They were arrogant. They were selfish. They were madmen, but they were brilliant. So just because someone is smart, sometimes they think, this is beyond me, right? I'm so much greater than working on kindness, or working on patience, or working on on arrogance. I'm just too smart for this. This is for the people who don't have as much intellect as I do. And it's a big mistake. And the Ramchal tells us, I'm here writing this book for those who desire to get close to God, for those who desire to be Godlike. The word Adam, which is mankind, we all know comes from the word Adama, which means from the earth, because man was taken from the earth. God took earth and molded man. So what does that have to do with us? So God created us from the earth, so therefore we're earth. Now what? So if you take the word Adam, it also the root of it is also Adameh. Not only Adama, which is earth, but Adameh, which means to emulate, to be godlike. That's our purpose in this world, is to be godlike. How godlike can we become? God is all patient. God is all kind. God is all giving. God is all forgiving. God is all forgetting of our sins. God is all patient. Those are the traits we as Adam, as mankind, we're trying to emulate. We're trying to emulate God's traits. You ever wonder how much patience a parent has for a child? Right? Sometimes very limited. Right? But imagine how much more patience God has for us. Much more than a parent has for a child. I guarantee it. Sometimes a parent can say, you know what? Just put that video game on and just get out of here. Just go. Just go. Yes, buy it, no problem. Just go. Right? I had students many years ago who were from homes. The majority of my group, my students at that time, this is in a different country. The majority of my students were from Los Angeles, and the guy who got cheaped out, these were all 17-year-olds. So since they were 16, they had their own cars, and the guy who was a cheap guy got only a Lexus, right? The other guys were all driving Beamers, right? And I asked them, I said, I don't understand, which one of your parents thought it was a good idea for a 16-year-old boy to have a BMW? Who thought it was a good idea? You know what their answer was? Our parents just didn't want to deal with us. So they gave us a car and go. Just get out of my life. And it's a terrible thing. Right? Hashem says, no. I want you. I want to have a relationship. Right? And sometimes in that relationship, God has to mold circumstances to get us to be committed to that relationship, just as He wants us to be committed to that relationship. So, what the Ramchal then continues to say is that the true service of God does not require one to inflict pain upon themselves or to distance themselves from pleasure. You know, one of the big contrasts that Jews have with other religions, that Judaism has with other religions, is that in many other religions, or at least in a few in particular, in order to grow spiritually, you need to remove yourself physically. You need to be materialistically ignorant in order to connect spiritually. Right? And we know that there are priests. The priests can't get married, right? Because they have to refrain from all worldly pleasures. So in order to grow spiritually, you have to remove yourself physically. In Judaism, that's not the case. In Judaism, you cannot grow spiritually without the physical. And taking that physical and elevating it. So you need to take the physical world that we're living in and make it spiritual. Why do we make a blessing on food? Why do we make a blessing on food? Because now that this food becomes a vessel through which you connect to Hashem, to the Almighty, now this food is no longer food. This food now became a vessel of spirituality. That's why we say make a blessing. It's not, we can eat because we want to satiate our hunger, or we can eat to give us energy to serve God. We're doing the same act of eating. I could be eating with someone, eating a hot dog, right? A burger, right? So we both order the same burger. Great. One makes a blessing and one doesn't make a blessing. Is it still the same food? Well, potentially it looks like the same food, but when one makes a blessing on that food, that food became a vessel through which one connected to the Almighty. It's no longer food. Now it's all spiritual. That food became a tool through which you connected to God. To the other, it may just be materialistic food, physical food. So we see that there are different ways we can live in this world. We can live a completely physical life, a completely spiritual, or what seems to be spiritual world that is removed from all physical, or we can live in a perfect blend of both. And that's what Judaism is. Judaism is all about blending the two worlds of physical and spiritual. The big question is how to do that. How do you take something physical and make it spiritual? Right? So that's one of the things that the Ramchal will focus on. Now, many people also think that in order to get to the point where I am spiritual, I have to inflict pain upon myself, so I remove myself even more from a physical world. There's this idea that people roll unclothed in snow, right? And it's a form of affliction. It's a form of purification, sort of like removing all physical elements. Ramchal says that's not going to get you any holier. That's not going to get you any closer. You might want to do that as an activity. If you go to Alaska, right, and you want to experience what it means to be freezing cold, there are people who do that.
They do that in Coney Island every year.
There you go, Coney Island. You don't got to go to Alaska, right?
Crazy man.
But either way, that's not the way the Torah wants. That's not the way the Almighty wants us to connect to Him.
What about sackcloth and ashes?
Oh, so there's a right time for it, right? We see that by Mordechai and Esther, right? There was a time, but it was a very limited time. It was 3 days of sackcloth and ashes. That's what that time required. But it's not a regular state of existence. We see the same with like you have Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. So you have a 25-hour period. You sit on the floor. You don't eat, right? Okay, there's a time for that as well. But look at Shabbos, on the other hand. On Shabbos, there's a mitzvah to eat. By the way, there's this myth that calories don't count on Shabbos. They count right after Shabbos, okay? On Shabbos they don't. Right after Shabbos they do. But there's a special mitzvah to eat on Shabbos. And not only to eat to eat the finest foods you can get. The Talmud tells us that one of the great sages would go to the marketplace on Sunday. You'd see this really nice, good, juicy piece of meat, right? So you'd say, I found the meat for Shabbos. And the next day he'd come to the marketplace again, and he found the even better cut of meats. He says, I found a great piece of meat. This is for Shabbos, right? Comes Tuesday, and then every day, because the focus is, what's the best I can get for Shabbos? People sometimes have the question as to, well, can you afford Shabbos? I mean, it's you're buying meat and you're buying good food. It can get costly. So what does the Midrash tell us? God tells the Jewish people, by the way, this is a promise, anybody can take it to the bank. Take it to the bank. Levu alai vani porea. Borrow on me. You don't have money? No problem. For Shabbos, borrow on me, I pay you back. I got you covered. It's a promise from God. Try it. And if you do have the money, you better spend it. But if you don't have the money, and you're cautious, I don't know, you know what? God says, I'll cover that expense. And that expense does not include, it doesn't go into the account of the set amount of income that one is designated for Rosh Hashanah. On Rosh Hashanah, one of the things that we have judgment on is how much money will we earn that year. From Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. The money for Shabbos is not included. That's on top of it. Depends on what you spend. You might as well eat good food. God is saying, eat on me. It's on the house. Order anything you want from the menu. It's on me. But do it for Shabbos. Do it for the honor of Shabbos. Okay? So, it's just another idea of how the Jewish people don't run away from materialism. We don't run away from delicacies. On the contrary, there's a right path through which we connect with delicacies and materialism. Not just for self-gratification, but for glorification of God. Right? And again, we're living in a culture or in a world where that's sort of, it's like, well, isn't that hypocritical? Isn't that, how can you be godly and be physical? We'll get to that. Any questions so far? No questions. A shy crowd here. Okay.
Will God give you a credit card?
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so now let's begin with the beginning of the first chapter. The beginning of the first chapter is as follows. Yesod HaChasidut V'shoresh HaAvodah HaTmima Hu, I'm going to translate every word, Hu she'yitbarer v'yitamet etzel ha'adam ma'chovato b'olam. So the Ramchal begins in the following way. He says, Yesod HaChasidut, the foundation of true piety, V'shoresh HaAvodah HaTmima, and the root of perfect service of Hashem. We focus here for a second on the words. Okay, we gave two different types of definitions. We gave the foundation of true piety, foundation, and the other is the root of perfect service of Hashem. Anybody notice two different types of things here? One is a foundation, and one is a root. What is a root? A root of a tree, right? A root grows organically. What is a foundation? Foundation is man-made. You dig down, you put the bricks, and you put all of the foundation that's necessary there, all the cement or whatever it is, and the deeper the foundation, the taller the building. The wider the foundation, the wider the building. It all depends on how you built the foundation. You built a solid foundation, you can build a solid building on top of it. You built a weak foundation, you'll have a weak building on top of it. But that is all in your hands, so to speak. It's something which you control. It's something which is in your hands. It's your choice. What is something like a root of a tree that grows organically. You got to give it time. The more you water it, the more you nurture it, the stronger, the bigger, the taller, and the deeper it gets. These are two separate functions. My grandfather mentions this when he talks about education, educating children. He says you need these two functions for education. You need the function of planting, and you need the function of building. The times the child needs encouragement, the child needs, he needs to be built, and that's when you're doing that building. And there are times you just have to let it grow. Let the child grow. And you can't, think about it like this. I had a friend of mine who brought over to my house an etrog tree, a citrus tree. And it was this little citrus tree. And we planted it. And of course you have to wait 3 years because you have the laws, the Torah tells us you can't touch a fruit tree for the first 3 years. You can just got to let it grow wild. After 3 years, right, then you can start enjoying from its fruit. But imagine that after, forget a fruit tree, but you have, my children sometimes, they bring home this little cup with dirt in it. I'm like, what's in that cup? They're like, oh, if we water it, my teacher told me that if you water it, then, we're going to start seeing it grow. Well, okay, and then we'll find out. So what happens? So you water a little bit, water another little bit, water another little bit, right? And then a few days later, you start seeing the buds coming out. Like, oh, it's so exciting, the buds are there. But you know what? I want it to be a full tree already. So let's grab those buds and let's pull it out, right? So that way it becomes a tree. What's going to happen? You're going to ruin your whole plant. Why? Because you're going to pull out its roots. You can't force growth of something organic. Right? You have to let the growth, you have to let the roots take their way, let them establish themselves so that it can continue to grow. So we have these two ways in which we grow as human beings. There are parts of us that need to be built and parts that need to get their roots in. Okay? Just a few examples of this. If you try to teach a 4-year-old how to drive a car, right? You might be devastated that your car got crashed and you can't figure out why, right? I don't understand. I told them what to do, right? And I understand why they just don't follow instructions, because they're not exactly at that time ready for this kind of information. That doesn't mean that there isn't one kid in China who can ride a tractor or drive a bus. Okay, we're not saying that there isn't somebody out there who is skilled in those areas. And there are children, these miracle babies who 2 years old, they can read the whole book of Harry Potter, right? And understand it, and they have the greatest vocabulary in the world, and they can pass any of those games, the game shows. What are they? Wheel of Fortune, or any of those? What are those like? Jeopardy, right? They can. Great, so talented. That's not the majority of us, right? Of course, except for Scott. Okay, except for Scott, he's just got it all. Okay, but we what's that? So we all have these two functions. One is that we need to be built, and that, by the way, for the most part, is the responsibility of a parent, is to build that child, is to give them the support and to give them the encouragement and to give them the freedom when needed as well, but to keep on building. That's a parent, and that doesn't really stop at any point, right? That they're they're 18, goodbye, get out. Right? This is a constant life job of a parent, is to build and to build and to build. Okay? But then we have another part which is organic. And this, for example, our sages tell us is that the Mishnah says that at the age of 3, a child learns one thing. At the age of 5, a child learns another thing. At the age of 10, a child learns another thing. Not one thing, but there's right. So at the beginning, when a child is able to talk, they start teaching them Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Right. This is the first you teach them emunah. You teach them faith. The first thing you teach a child is to say Torah tziva lanu Moshe. The Torah was commanded to us by Moshe, right? So that you right away instill in that child faith in Hashem, in His Torah. That's how you start. Then, when they're 5, they start learning Chumash. They start learning the Torah. When they're 10, they start learning Mishnah. When they're 15, they start learning Talmud. When they're 13, they're obligated to mitzvot. For males, for females, it's 12 years old. And we discussed that, the 12 and 13 year, why it's 12 for a female and why it's 13 for a male. We discussed that in our Talmud class on Fridays at 12 o'clock. Lunch and learn, be there. So, and then at 18, that's time to get married. Shmonayeseh l'chuppah. Right? There's a time for everything. When you're 20, when you're 30, and when you're 40, and you're 50, and 60, 70. Each one, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of Our Fathers, gives us an exact responsibility of what we're obligated to at that time. Or what we mature to at that time. Why? Why can't I teach them Talmud when they're 5 years old? Because you'll do damage to the child. They're not ready for it. Right? There's a right time for things. You have to let them grow organically. It needs to come at the right time. You can't force it on the child. You can't force it on an adult. You know, someone comes to work for you, you expect them day one, let's go, do this, do this, do this, do this. You come the next day, like, where are the jobs I gave you? I can't remember everything you said. What do you mean like, you can't remember? I told you, right? You understand, it takes time for them to acclimate to their new environment, to, you know, to figure out what needs to be done. And that's a normal state of our growth. So we have these two functions. Okay? So the first thing Ramchal is telling us is that there are these two functions, and that is Shehu Yitbarer, Hu Sheyitbarer V'Yitamet Etzel Ha'adam Ma Chovato B'Olamo. So the first part is that it's got to become clear and verified to himself, to a person, what is his obligation in his world. My grandfather asks, teaching us how to learn the writings of Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Lotzato, the author of this incredible work. He says, there's a duplicitous terminology. To clarify and verify, what do you need these two different terminologies? And then it says, right? So this is a theme that you see throughout the writing of Ramchal, where he's using these two, a duplicitous term. Can anybody explain what the difference is between clarifying and verifying? Seems the same almost.
No,
different
not the
words.
same.
So what is it?
One is making clear, crystal clear.
And the other?
And verify is to confirm. That's different.
Okay, so what am I confirming?
I don't know, whatever you're going to confirm. That's different than clarifying.
But he's saying that how do you get to true piety and the root of perfect service of Hashem? It is formed by a person clarifying and verifying.
Okay, so first you clarify, and then once you've clarified, then you verify.
What am I verifying?
The clarification.
Okay, so here, so you're saying good. You're saying good. Let's understand something. We have two very different functions. Okay, just hold head here for a second. Okay, we have two different functions that make our decisions, or that at least should make our decisions. All right, I'll tell you a story, and I've shared this story before here. Okay? I got a phone call from a dear friend of mine. He says to me, what do I do? He says, my wife called me up. She went out shopping. And she said she found this amazing dress for 70% off. And it's only $350. And she wants to know if she should buy it. And he says, he was young guy. $350? What? We're not going to a wedding. We don't need to, it's not, what we get $350 for that? Absolutely. Are you crazy? We can't afford that. You know we can't afford that. She says, but it's 70% off. You know what? You know how much money I'm saving? Do you understand? And he says, but we can't afford it. Now, what's this argument that's going on? What is the real argument that's going on? What's going on is that she has an emotional desire to buy this garment, right? It's her heart. He has his intellect, which tells him we can't afford it. I don't care how beautiful it is. I don't care why you want it. I don't care how many percent off. But, right? So you have these two functions. The desire, I want this. And on the other hand, the intellect which says this is no good. I'll give you another example. Someone who you don't like says something. Okay? You don't like this person for whatever reason. And you want to say something and just bite back at them. So you have that line, it's ready to go. It's a zinger of all zingers. All right? And you're gonna lace into them, and it's the perfect crowd because you can embarrass them and you just got them nailed, right? So your heart is saying, go get him, get him, get him, right? And your intellect says, you know something? Not the right thing to do. As much as I want to, it's just not the right thing to do. So it's not the question of which one. The question is, who's going to win? Who's going to win? The intellect or the emotion? That's the real question. A person wants, you have someone is saying about how great their new boat is. All right? Oh, they just bought this little jet ski, and you want to one-up them and tell them, when I was a kid, I rode those kinds of things. Now I ride fast things, right? Right? You want to one-up them, right? So you want to gloat, you want to show off, right? So your emotion tells you, I really want everyone to know how, but your intellect is telling you, you know what? Maybe, hopefully, if your intellect works properly, right? Hopefully, you would tell you, you know what? Let them show off and let them be proud of their thing, and don't steal their thunder, right? But who's going to win? How many times do we just want to say something and we can't hold ourselves back, even though we know it's going to do us damage? Ask any married man. Don't say it. Just don't say it. No, you have to say it. Why did you have to say it? Right? Just hold back. Keep quiet for 10 more minutes and you're in the safe zone, right? No. Right? You agree? All the time?
Yeah. At least I have somebody here also. I'm not solamente.
You're not the only married man with a wife in the room. Yeah, I hear you. But it's like, why? But because we get used to following our emotion versus our intellect. If you look at television, or if you look at movies, or if you look at, it's all targeting your emotions. That's all it is. You watch a football game, right? Guess what? As soon as it's getting exciting, timeout. Okay, now they're going to take a 5-minute commercial and they're going to try to sell you anything from buffalo wings to cars to shampoo and everything is going to sell. They're not going to be sad people like, I really can't afford this car. This is terrible. Bad decision. Right? No. It's going to be like, woo, happy holidays. Right? A brand new car. 0 down, 0 APR, 0. Just come in, sign, and go. Right? They're trying to work with your emotion. And look how beautiful that car is. And it comes with a big, huge ribbon on top. Right? And you go to the store, it's like, no ribbon? Right? Right? You just like, they're dealing all with our emotions. Right? And that's the problem, is that we're not exercising using our intellect enough. So what the Ramchal is telling us, number one, is you have two functions your mind and your heart. Now let me ask you a question. The more important, right? Anybody know why the Golan Heights is so important to the state of Israel? The Golan Heights. Why is it strategic advantage? Because it's up high. Whoever is on high controls, right? It works the same in the physiology of man. You know, animals are all horizontal. Most. We're all horizontal. Man is vertical. Why?
We're higher than they.
Well, not only because we're higher, because your mind is supposed to be your primary function. You're supposed to follow your mind, not your heart. The problem is sometimes it doesn't get up to the top because we're so instinctive and impulsive with our actions and reactions. So we don't end up using our mind properly. So instead of becoming people who use our intellect to make our decisions, which is at the top, we skip the top and go straight to our heart. See, the reason why animals are all at the same height is because, you know, has anyone ever seen a camel with a college degree? Anybody?
With a what?
A college degree. Anybody ever see a cat worrying, oh, where am I going to get food for my children tonight? How am I going to feed them? Right? What's going to be on the table for Shabbos? Right? You never saw a cat worrying about that. Right? Why? Because they live in a very, very different existence than we do. And they live in a world of much more trust of the Almighty. God feeds all of His creatures. Right? It's part of our blessings that we say every day, that God feeds all of His creations. Everyone, including human beings. Everybody. That's God's job. But we don't trust God enough. So we got to worry for it. We got to take care of it. Animals are, the word in Hebrew for animals is behema. Bet hey, mem hey. Which also, if you divide the word bet hey and mem hey, it's two different words, which is ba ma, which is within it is everything. You take a cat, for example, which is 1 minute old. 1 minute old. And you put it on the rooftop. Okay? You know what will happen? You'll look around. Nice place. Got a nice pad over here, right? Looks around. He walks to the edge of the roof. He looks down. Nah, not a good idea. Turns around, walks away. Take a 1-year-old baby and put it on a rooftop. Right? A 1-year-old baby. Human. Put them on the rooftop. Where do you think they're going? Right down. Why? Because we're Adam. Adam is like the earth, like we mentioned earlier. The earth, you need to plow, you need to sow, you need to nourish it, you need to teach it its instincts, you need to teach it. We grow like this, like what comes from the soil, from the earth. If you don't plant, you ever drive out to West Texas, like really far west, like 700 miles from here west, right? And just see a beautiful table on the side of the road set in beautiful, with flowers and chairs around it. Would anybody think that just happened on its own? No, obviously, someone needed to do something to get it there. Would you ever go in the middle of a desert and find a beautiful apple tree? No, unless someone actually went there and planted it. These things don't just happen on their own. You have to plant it in order for it to grow. You need to do something for it in order for it to grow. Animals don't need schooling to get their instincts. Right? A lion doesn't need to learn how to kill another animal in school. It's built in. They have this built in. Their instincts are built in. That's the same with this, as small as an ant. Even lice, which is the smallest of ants, it knows exactly where it needs to be, when it needs to be, how it needs to be, everything. All the way to the biggest animal. have all its instincts built in. Now, it doesn't mean they can't learn tricks. It doesn't mean they can't ride a unicycle and juggle at the same time. But their instincts are the instincts. There was once an argument, they say, between the Rambam and other great philosophers, where they argued whether or not you can change the nature of something. And the Rambam said you can't change the nature. They said, well, why don't you come to the palace and we'll show you cats that can serve as waiters. We trained them. He says, but you still can't, you can train them, but you can't change their nature. They said, oh well, we'll show you. So they go in, he goes in and he sits down and they're about to serve the food, and indeed the cats are coming out, and he said, you see, the cats are coming out with the trays and they're serving, just like, it's unbelievable. Like, he pulls out of his pocket a little bag, and in the bag there's a little mouse. He lets the mouse go, they drop the plates and they run. Right? You can train it, but you can't change its nature. Right? You can't change its nature. It's all built in. Right? It's not because they were trained very well as children. It's in the nature of who they are. Man, we have a lot of things in our nature. One of them is that we're extremely lazy. You know why? See this pen, this marker? What happens if I leave go of it? Falls down. Guess what? We're just like this marker. We like to just relax. Sit back on the beach chair. Sit back on the recliner. Right? Get comfortable. We don't want to go out. We don't want to run. We have to. We might be motivated by career. We might be motivated by money. We might be motivated by honor. We might be motivated by a lot of different things. But by nature, we're heavy. We're lazy. That's the way we are. Ramchal talks about that. Talks about that in the I believe it's in the 6th chapter. It's where he starts right away in the beginning of the 6th chapter. That's where he starts. Ki teva ha'adam kaved me'od. The nature of man is that we're extremely sluggish. Yeah. We're like this, he doesn't want to just be in the air floating around. He just drops down and that's it. Leave me alone. Right? Leave me alone. Put me, right? That's the way we are. So how do we change that? Well, that's what the Ramchal is teaching in his book. How do we become people that go get him versus people who are just, this is the way it is. I'm just tired. I'm just, I'm old. Leave me alone. Right? So that's what the Ramchal is dealing with. So now, we have these two different functions. We said, what are the two functions? Intellect, our mind, our intellect, and our heart, our emotion. Okay? Interesting that in the Shema, I remember the last chapter we spoke in the Shema, we spoke about Lo taturach v'levavchem v'achinechem. You should not go run after your impulse, your urges of your heart and your eyes. It's the same, right? The eyes are connected to the heart. The eye sees, the heart desires. Right? If you didn't look at their purse or their shoes, you wouldn't desire it. But you looked. Now you want it. Right? That's why don't ever let your wife go window shopping. It's just going to cost you more. Right? Because she's just going window shopping. You know what happens a week later? It's no longer window shopping. It's shopping. Right? Because all those things, all those desires, all of those wants that they saw are now right? So it's just a very interesting thing of how our eyes have a very strong impact on us. But we have to let our intellect operate. We have to let our intellect operate. Now,
Rabbi,
yes.
What's the difference then?
What do you mean? What's the difference of what?
The question you asked, the difference between clarification and verification.
Oh, okay. So very good. Very good. So let me ask a question as follows, okay? If I know that humility is a very good trait, does that mean that I will start being humble? No. So you see that there's a difference between clarifying it and understanding it, and verifying it, meaning making it part of my existence. Okay? Very different. Right? You can see 100 videos about safe driving and still be a terrible driver because you haven't put it into practice. Just because you know something doesn't mean you do something. Okay? A person can know how to pray, doesn't mean they pray. A person can know how to play basketball, doesn't mean they actually can play basketball. Which is, I always wonder about coaches. They're yelling at their players, do this, do that. Get on the field and let's see you try to do that. Right? Let's see, right? It's like easy to say it, right? But can you do it? It's the same thing with our traits. Easy for us to say what's right and what's wrong, but let's see if we can actually put it into our actions in a daily, right? So whenever the Ramchal is using this duplicitous terminology, what he's saying is it's stage 1, understand it. Stage 2, internalize it. Make it part of your daily routine. Make it part of your doing on a regular basis. 2 very different worlds. My grandfather always says that there are 2 different parts of Mussar study. There's learning Mussar, and then there's the work of Mussar. There's the learning of Mussar, which is to just know, get an understanding of what it is that we should be doing. And then it's how do we implement it and get it into our daily routines. Yes?
The word implement is what I must think there too. Why did he say verify as opposed to implement? To put into action.
Verify is just a terminology used in the translation. If you do it in the Hebrew, it's shitbarer, it should become clear, right, to clarify. V'yit amet, from the word emet, which is truth. Make it real. Make it real within yourself. He uses the term verify, right? But it really is to make it real within yourself. That it's not just a concept, right? Oh, it's a terrible thing to yell. It's terrible, right? And then we go, did you hear what I said? I said it's a terrible thing to yell, right? It's like people don't even realize that they could be saying something, and they themselves not even following through on what they know is the right thing. Right? You know, there are people who can preach. They could preach something and yet completely not live by what they preach. They don't live it. Right? Why? It's not because they're evil people. It's because they haven't harnessed this mechanism of learning it, knowing it, does not mean that you'll actualize it. And that's what the Ramchal is identifying right in the beginning. Okay? It means it's not enough for you to have clarity on this. You also have to make it real. You have to implement it. Put it into your daily practice. So think about it. We all know that, I always say this, and we learned this previously, that everything that you see going on around you is a message. It's a message. You ever standing there with your friend and he sees something and you don't see it? Or she sees it and you don't see it? And you're like, you're standing right there. They saw it like, whoa, right? And you're like, what just happened? Like, you didn't see it. It was right in front of your face. Like, how could you not see it? Guess what? God didn't want you to see it. There's nothing you can learn from that story, perhaps, which is why God didn't want you to see it. The person right next to you had to learn a lesson. There was something that they needed to learn from that experience, which is why, or a message they were supposed to get from it, which is why they saw it and you didn't see it. You're right there. So what we see is that we constantly. So the Baal Shem Tov, I believe it is, that says that everything you see is like a mirror. So you ever in Walmart and you see someone yelling at their child in Walmart, right? And you say, "Oh, they look like lunatics. I'm getting to the other aisle, right? I'm just going away, right?" You know why you had to see that? Just know it's a mirror of how you look when you get angry, right? That's exactly the way you look when you're trying to discipline your child sometimes, right? So it's a wake-up call. Now, that doesn't mean that you'll stop doing it. Okay? So just because you know that it's a terrible thing, anybody here think that stealing is a good thing? No, everybody knows that stealing is a terrible thing. Right? Is there anybody here who can say that they've never even slightest done anything, well, like even one penny off? Right? We hope that's what we aspire to be. Well, not even on the taxes, not on anything, not one penny. Well, a little bit here, maybe a little bit over there, but it's nothing significant. It's just a toothpick, It's like, I tell my children, we go to the restaurant, we go to a restaurant, right? Sometimes when you go out, they have like these candies, and so some people think this means stock up, okay? Right? It's like candies. I'm missing a few in my car. They grab a few, and now they have for their car, and the toothpicks. What?
That would be me.
So
My car.
there's a story that one of the Tanaic sages was walking on a shortcut, and he stopped on the shortcut. There was a little picket fence, so the sage took a little piece, like a little sliver of a piece of the picket fence, and he used it as a toothpick. So the daughter said, the daughter of the landowner said to the rabbi, "You have to pay for that." He says, "What's this? It's a little sliver of wood. It's nothing." He said, "Yeah, but then the next person comes, takes a little. The next person comes. Before I know it, I don't have a fence." She said, "You're right. Right? It's forbidden. You're not allowed to do that. Then you have to pay. Right? Because it's just a toothpick. It's just a toothpick. Right? But so now it could very well be that the restaurants don't mind. That's like the sort of the thank you for shopping here. Thank you for coming to our restaurant. Take a few candies and take a few. Right? But I tell my children that you're not meant to take more than one, because if everybody takes 10, they're not going to have any. Right? So take one, not one for later. Now it's one for now. Right? And I want them to learn that you have to be careful about even a toothpick from a restaurant. Right? Now, please don't write me notes about how you never took another toothpick from a restaurant, right? And don't reprimand anybody saying, you're a thief, okay? You took 2 toothpicks, right? The rabbi said you're a thief. No, I'm not saying that, okay?
Give him your name.
Yeah, please don't. Tell him the other rabbi, the one down the block.
There's a restaurant that has a sign on its candy thing that says, "Courtesy of the American Diabetes Association."
There you go. That's
Make you
right.
think.
So, or the Dentist Association, right? Yeah. Sponsored by the dentist, yeah. So the fact that we know something doesn't mean, I bet, okay, that if you went over to Mr. Madoff and you say, "Tell me, is stealing a good thing?" He said, "Stealing is a terrible thing. It's immoral. It's unethical. You shouldn't do it." Right? So what happened? So what happened? Just because you know something doesn't mean you do something. Right? And that's what the Ramchal is beating up again and again. It's not enough to know something. You have to put it into actualization. So, by the way, it's every area like this. It's also religiously, it's with things, right? We could know about Shabbos, doesn't mean we actually observe Shabbos. We can know about prayer, doesn't mean we actually pray. We could know about mitzvahs, doesn't mean we actually observe them, right? It's also about our traits. Just because we know that something is a good or a bad trait doesn't mean that we do or don't do them. Okay? So he says, "Hu sheyitbarer v'yitamet etzel ha'adam ma chovato b'olamo." It is, right? A person needs to clarify and make real to themselves what is his obligation in his world. So my grandfather points this out as one of the very, very important and critical teachings of the Ramchal. What is his obligation? Not in the world. In his world. Every single individual, Every single one of us here in this room has their own obligation in their own world. Right? So Bobby, you were born in Des Moines, Iowa, right? And you were born to a very specific family with siblings, right? With parents, aunts, uncles of your own, right? This is your world. It's your own perfect world. And you know what? You as an individual have your challenge that you need to perfect in your world. So now the person sitting next to you says to you, hey, that's so interesting that you do that. You know that you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do that. And like not understanding perhaps what your world is. Their world is a different world. Where they grew up, it might be a different way in which they conduct themselves. So what happens is that sometimes we think, well, we're all in a world together, right? And therefore we should all have the same set of standards. Well, that's not necessarily true. Yeah, we should have laws. The laws should be the same set of laws. But as individuals, everyone has their own purpose. And they have their own responsibility. And they have their own set of things that they need to accomplish during their lifetime. And what your obligation to accomplish in your lifetime can and most likely is very different than any other person in this room. And nobody in this room has the same purpose. Okay, so that's going to lead to another question. Well, Rabbi, what's my purpose? Why am I here? Okay, that's what we have the Ramchal for, and that's what we're going to be learning in the coming weeks. Ma chovato be'olamo. What is your obligation in your world? You were born with a certain set of skills. You are an individual. You are unique. There will never, ever be a Benjamin again like you. Ever, ever, ever. There will never be one like you. You wonder, well, why did God give me all of my characteristics, all of my life situation, for what? So that I just be like another Joe? Right, why? God gave me exactly what I need to be the greatest me. Now I have to start investigating who is me? Who am I? That's our job. That's the entire purpose of what Ramchal is writing. Let's identify who we are. And then once we identify who we are, we got to make it real and actually focus our attention to accomplishing what we need to accomplish throughout our lifetime. Okay, we're good? So, I would say, and I have a couple of sheets I can send out to everyone in an email. If you email me, I will try to email you back with that promise that I have a worksheet of understanding our own traits, which has a random selection of 13 positive traits and 13 negative traits, and you can mark yourself where you feel you are in those traits. Now, some of those traits you may not even recognize that you even possess those traits, positive or negative. Like me, I never get angry. Doesn't exist. Well, you have to think into it. What is really anger? Arrogance? Me, arrogant. Right? There are many different traits that are listed over there, positive and negative traits. I'll be happy to send them out. God willing, next week I'll have copies for everyone. But to just get to identify that we are a unique individual. Every single one of us. There's no two yous. There never will be. Just like your DNA is different, just like your fingerprint is different, so too your personality is different, your purpose in this world is different, your uniqueness in this world is different. And your job, your obligation of what you need to accomplish on planet Earth is very special and different than what anybody else is required to accomplish in their lifetime. So our big goal, hopefully with understanding the coming teachings of the Ramchal, is to get as much of an understanding as possible into ourselves of who we really are and putting it into action. With that, my friends, thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you for joining us. To our friends online, you're welcome to come here live. Everyone in the class here looks so much better in real life than on video. And you're welcome to join us every Monday night, 7:30 at the Torch Center. Thank you for joining us. Have a terrific evening.